Awesome. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's doing okay.
Yes. It looks like people are kind of trickling in. Just bear with me, everybody. This is my first time doing a interview on Discord, and I'm really excited to have Alex Pardee here. Also, is it Pardee or Pardee? How do you?
I mean, you can pronounce it any way you want. I've heard everything, but it's actually Pardee with the emphasis on D. But I wish it was Party. That would be a little bit better.
Your artwork is a party, so I mean, yeah. I think it's okay to get started. No?
Oh, all yeah, right. No, yeah, we totally can.
Cool.
Now that there's madness going on around the United States right now, but
yeah,
I'll try not to be too distracted.
I was just gonna say the same thing. It's nice to have this little bubble of joy and creativity here. So I'm glad that you're here, at least until the country is burned down to the ground.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, art's always been a distraction for me. So this is no different. It's always been the way to escape.
Totally. So actually, that brings me to my first question is, how did you get started with painting, and who are your influences?
Well, I'll give you the short version of the story, which, I mean, I'm older now. I'm over 40, so it's been a long road. But I'll give you the short version is that I was always kind of interested in art when I was little. I was always kind of like doodling Sunday comics and Garfield and that kind of stuff. But I wasn't totally into when I was growing up, being an artist wasn't considered a profession that was like you had a good chance at doing. So it was never really that much of an emphasis. But when I was 14, I was struggling really hard with depression and anxiety. I had a chemical imbalance, and I was in the hospital actually for a little while.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, I was trying to do as much as I could to get distracted. Nothing was really making me feel better. So I was just trying to, I was trying to do different things, playing sports and this and that, and nothing was making me feel better. And while I was trying to take medicine as well. But one night I just kind of picked up a pencil and started scribbling. And that, before I knew it, 2 hours had gone by, and I felt I wasn't thinking about being sick. So that was kind of the moment where I was just okay, I don't know if this is something that'll be forever, but as long as this kind of creative process makes me feel better, I'm just going to do it. And so that was kind of the moment where I just started doing art, was about when I was 14 or 15. And I just, from there got some art books that were made for 5-year-olds and just tried to stay focused on learning from the ground up, and then eventually kind of just running with it in my own way.
Wow, that's really cool. It's amazing how much art and music can just really, it just takes you out of whatever bad feelings are going on. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Thank God for it. And I mean, and I'm looking your work has this, just quality to it that's both, it's incredibly beautiful and stunning, but also you see there's this darkness being expressed too. But I mean, it's just cool how everything, the overlap with the beauty and creepiness.
Thank you. I mean, I think that is a culmination of my influences. I think growing up, I was fascinated by horror movies even as as a 7-year-old. I think my parents were pretty liberal as far as what I could watch. So I absolutely loved horror movies. And around the mid 80s was when I started noticing as a kid, a bunch of kind of more demented type of art. That's when Garbage Pail Kids were out. That's when skateboard graphics were first introduced as being these weird, monstrous stuff. So I think these brightly colored, demented take on pop culture and just kind of stuff that I'd never seen before, well, always kind of played a part in later on what I was influenced by. But I do love when I I never like, I didn't really find what I was like interested in painting and drawing for a while. But once it kind of settled in, I realized that I liked confusing people with my art. And so like, I would get,
Love that.
when I would draw or paint something that was just completely out of my imagination, and it was something that like I thought was cool, back in the late 90s or so, the reaction that I would get, whether I would show it to friends or people would see it or whatever, is like, oh, that's confusing because it's like gross or it's unsettling, but it's brightly colored, so it's pretty. So I'm just like confused, and I don't know if I like it. And so like I liked that reaction, and I just kind of kept running with it. So I definitely fuse kind of these like contrasting, things where you don't really know how to feel. Like, is it scary or is it happy? I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I wanted to say it really harkens back to like the aesthetic and of like Ren and Stimpy and like all the stuff that was on like all the shows that were on Liquid Television.
Yeah, like the MTV Oddities, the Head, the Max, those kind of things. Yeah, the Max actually, the Max, the original comic book and the cartoon as well. But the Max is probably the biggest influence in my entire career as far as like.
Wow. I totally
what changed my life at like when I was 15, I think is when the Max comic came out. And at that time I was into comic books, but everything, like I grew up in the suburbs, so we had access to just like the mainstream comics. So everything was superhero based. And the Max was this like, it was a superhero comic on the outsides, but then like when you read it, it was like the first time I'd read a comic book that dealt with like teenage insecurities and angst, and like the art style was just all over the place. It was a mess and it was emotion based, and I was just like, oh, you can do this with like comics and stuff, like this is awesome. So
that's like that's really fucking cool. It's just it's cool to see how like now that you're saying like what your influences were, I'm really like everything makes sense now. I mean, not that it didn't to me. I mean,
right.
As an artist too, I like just really weird shit. looking at, I don't know if you see what I'm sharing right now, but
I can see it.
Your sketches also look like finished pieces to me. It's like wild. So, and also, I don't know for the music fans in here, but Alex did the cover for A$AP Rock's Impossible Kid, which is freaking dope.
Thank you. That's actually a good, not to segue too much into like kind of like the digital art and the crypto art stuff, but that is kind of a good representation of how I've been kind of fusing together traditional and digital stuff to kind of create stuff that I couldn't normally create traditional, which is why I'm getting into the digital and crypto space, because there's so much of my my process now involves both traditional and digital techniques, so I had a lot of fun with that project, and we just built that from the ground up. I think that cover alone took probably close to 1,000 hours.
Ooh, it looks like it. I was going to ask you, what was your process with that? If you're going to explain a little about how you kind of took the jump or merged your traditional skills with digital.
So basically, like going back to like me being inspired by the Max and the artist Sam Keith that created that, like he did a lot of this like emotional, messy artwork, kind of like, Ralph Steadman-y as well is another good example. And so I was driven to that kind of like emotion-based paintings, which a lot of my older paintings have like splattery effects and really kind of harsh watercolored messes and drips. And but that's something that no matter how much the technology is there, like you can't emulate that emotion, right? It's all kind of technical. So what I do is I'll do a lot of like traditional textures and kind of like splatters and ink work traditionally in like separate pieces of paper, and then I'll kind of scan all those together and I'll composite them over like an ink drawing. So then I start with like, it kind of sounds weird, but it's basically like I'll make like a 7-layer burrito or something. So I have these like So I have these like watercolor textures beneath it, and then like a real traditional ink drawing on top of it, and then I can go into Photoshop and into these other programs and actually fill in the spaces and separate out the textures and put some more colors on there and lighting and stuff. So it just really, like, by the time I'm done, like, a lot of the traditional stuff kind of falls to the background, but it's what is the base for how I kind of decide where lines are going to go and where things are going to form.
Yeah, that's. I'm just like looking at this this illustration and I'm like listening to you say how you did it, and I would think it took more than 1,000 hours. This is like wild. And when you created this, were you given the record to listen to first? Like, what was the conceptual process behind it?
Oh yeah. Luckily, I had been kind of friends with Aesop Rock for a while before that. I had previously worked with one of his label mates, Cage, on a couple albums in the previous, and so we all kind of became friends.
So cool.
So Aesop and I had been talking about working on something forever. And when he started working on that album, he basically was sending me stuff as he was going, because we knew that I was going to work on it. So he really, really trusted me. I think those are the best projects as far as like from a freelancer or hired illustrative point of like somebody who knows that they can trust you to do whatever not necessarily whatever you want, but doesn't really like give you so much direction. And so with him, he was just kind of like, the album is kind of like nature driven. I escaped the city and I moved into nature, and like listen to it and just see what you can think of, but maybe like have some nature stuff. So we talked about it obviously, but he just let me do whatever I want. So I ended up creating this whole kind of underworld of these creatures and this kid escaping the city and going into the woods and stuff. So it was kind of like an Alice in Wonderland kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's like the perfect amount of creative direction to get. That's like not enough, not too much information, and not enough information that you're like overthinking it. Just like, okay,
if there's not enough, if it's totally, it's not like nobody gives somebody a project and says 100% do whatever you want. I mean, there is that occasionally, but it's very rare, because that just means that they're kind of afraid to say what they want. So that when that happens, you'll do whatever you want, and they'll go, yeah, I didn't know that I didn't want
I'm a freelance illustrator too, so I totally know what you're talking about.
That's like one of the reasons why like I stopped. I used to design tattoos, and I eventually just was like, you know what, I'm never doing this again, because everybody would just be like that's something that goes on their body forever. So it's like really
it's a lot of pressure.
It's an honor to a degree, but it also is a lot of pressure. And then whenever someone goes, dude, I don't know, just make something sick, and then like you spend all this time drawing something, and they go, oh yeah, I don't want that. Can you make this like football player holding a fish? And you're like, well,
no.
All right.
No. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, and it's a lot of pressure to design something for somebody's body, and then you got to go back and draw it again, and then you have to hope that the tattoo artist can actually like do it right. It's out of your hands after that.
That's one of the things I kind of always am wondering. Like, there was a point where I thought about becoming a tattoo artist. This is like in the late 90s, and I always am kind of like, I wonder if I still would be doing that if I took it up, or if I would have given it up pretty quickly, because I don't know.
It's rough. I know a couple of tattoo artists, and it just seems like really. It seems like it's rewarding and challenging, but the aspects that are challenging are like too risky for my taste.
Most of the tattoo artists that I know have destroyed backs and wrists now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's also not good. It's actually like a occupational hazard to be an artist in any way, like for your posture, for your hands.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, to sort of bring it into that since we were talking about like transitioning to digital and stuff, like what was the like impetus for you, or like what introduced you to the world of NFTs, and like how did you get your start with that?
So I'm still very, very new to this whole space, and it's really, really exciting to me. I kind of have been looking into it and researching and even kind of collecting a couple pieces since for about a year, but I'm always very, very hesitant to kind of jump in because I didn't fully grasp it. But luckily, a friend of mine who's also one of the artists on Makerspace, named Frankie Nines. He actually we've developed a couple phone apps and mobile games together over the years, and he's always somebody that I've like really like, he's helped me kind of like transition into new media and new technology. Like anytime something new comes out, he'll be like, hey, we should try this and do it. And I always am fascinated by how I can get my world of art into these other new media and new spaces. So I'm always open to trying whatever he suggests. And he got really into kind of this and luckily kind of guided me as far as like layman's terms, like here's kind of what it is. And it took me a while to grasp it, but once I did, I got really fascinated with the opportunities that not just expanding my art into this other world, but like the opportunities to actually do stuff and to be able to share stuff in a way that I never would be able to before. Like it, and because I'm so new, like my upcoming drop with Makerspace tomorrow is only the 5th piece that I've done, the 5th NFT that I've released, and they've all been very I don't want to say stagnant, but they're more like digital paintings rather than like what I kind of like am shooting for, which is more spatial and experimental kind of animations and stuff like that. So I'm kind of gradually getting into it, but it's going to be awesome.
That sounds really cool. And I wanted to ask, I'm also kind of new to this space with art also, and do you have any advice for people who are, I'm sure there's other like artists here who've been lurking, especially in the whale community. Like, did you experience any like challenges, or did you find anything daunting about getting into this?
You know, the only thing that I'm finding challenging, and I'm getting a little better at it, is explaining the excitement to somebody who's very, very new to it or has never heard of it. I think that because it's such a technological driven platform that started in technology and started with people that are very intelligent, I think that because of that, I think some of the wording and some of the definitions and some of the explanations seem a little overwhelming, especially to artists that kind of just like grow up like not even paying attention to computers.
100%.
So I feel like that's kind of like it has made me like when I've been trying to kind of like talk with other artists, kind of contemporaries in my age and friends and stuff about, you know, the benefits of getting into it and the excitement. And it is very challenging, you know? So, but I'm getting better at it. But I think that if you're interested in it as an artist, I don't think that there should be any hesitation to try it out, because the one thing that I did know by my first initial couple of drops that I was very intimidated by, because I didn't want to, there was the one thing that I was nervous about going into it was that even though I had researched it and I had kind of paid attention, I didn't want to walk into a party that I wasn't invited to and kind of like have any kind of like unknown disrespect to a community. But when I decided to kind of do my first drop and just jump in there and say hi, like everybody was very welcoming. So I think it was the community, I think is really cool. And it's such a different community than I've built growing up with my traditional art, because of just the audience that it's reaching. You know, there's younger people, there's like more open-minded people and cool and excited people and other artists and doing these other things. And it's just a whole new pool of inspiration for me personally, and hoping to share that with others is awesome.
Yeah, I've found like I'm really only involved with the whale community so far, directly, and it's just been, everybody here is so welcoming and encouraging, and it seems like the whole space is kind of that way. There isn't like a sense of there's no like gatekeeping, there's no there doesn't really seem to be a hierarchy. It's just like there's room for everybody to share what they do, and room for everybody to celebrate it. It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's cool. It's and even like, you know, other artists that are pretty big within the community and have really cool expansive collections and stuff have basically just been like reached out and been like, hey, if you have any questions, let me know. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool. You know, like which it's anything community based is such a relief for people that grow up a little bit more reclusive and introverted, which a lot of artists are. So I think that having these online communities of support is really, really important for people trying to kind of discover their own art.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I actually wanted to ask you, did you go to art school before
I didn't. I was going to. I really wanted to, but what happened was, you know, in the early 90s is when I would have been going there. And at that time, still, like, the only really options were like, oh, you can work in commercials or you can be an art teacher or like work in a museum. Like, it was weird.
Yeah.
Like graphic design wasn't even really that huge outside of advertising. So I hesitated on going to art school when I graduated, and I ended up going to like 3.5 years of community college before I was like, all right, fuck it, I'm gonna go to art school. This is cool. This is what I want to do. And then I remember meeting with like my community college counselor, and they were like, okay, cool. Art schools are private schools, so you'll have to redo all your 3 years of school over there and pay like $50,000 a year for it. And I was like, okay, yeah, I don't need that. I'm just gonna go work at KB Toys and paint and draw for a while until I figure it out.
No, I think that was the right move, because I went to art school, and a lot of other people I know who did, they left feeling like they didn't make art for a long time, myself included, because it makes you get so much in your head, and then you stop just doing what you feel. And like you said before, your art is very, feelings and emotions based, and you were using it as an escape. And I think art school can kind of like trap you in this idea that like everything you do has to have like meaning and a story, or it has to look finished, or whatever that means,
Right. I do think that there's, since I don't have the experience of art school, I don't necessarily know how true this is, but that being said, without professional training, even though my road was longer, like I'm really happy with how it kind of, I just persisted and went on. But there will never be this feeling that I have imposter syndrome like constantly, because I never necessarily learned technical skills. So almost every time I approach a painting, some things are similar, but it's almost always a new experience. Like I don't know what I'm doing, or at least I feel like I don't. Like I trust myself, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can make something cool out of this, whatever. But like, I've never had that like technical confidence that I have seen a few friends have that have gone to art school, where I'm like, kind of like, man, if only I had this like confidence of like learning like how to mix colors correctly, or what perspective is, and this and that. So it's a weird back and forth where I always am like, yeah, I don't regret not going to art school, but maybe if I had these skills, I could be super cool.
As someone who went to art school, no, it didn't help with that. I still haven't.
You don't think you're super cool?
No, not at all. I totally have imposter syndrome also. I feel like it made it worse. But like that kind of brings me to this question that I just thought of now, is like, sure. What was your first professional gig, and like how did that? You mentioned you worked at KB Toys, which is super cool, but like,
dude, I worked at KB Toys for like 9 years.
It's awesome. It's such a great story.
Like all through the 90s, through the Power Rangers, through Tickle Me Elmo, through the dude. If I had like the first edition box of Pokemon cards that we sold there now, I'd be a fucking millionaire.
Damn.
But no, like my first like art gig, like once I realized, so I was I went through a few different phases, and I'll kind of just briefly touch on them. But I really wanted to do comic books in the 90s, and I sent submissions to every comic book publisher. Every single publisher just denied it, and which is, in hindsight, it's fine, because all of them were just like, you need better training, you don't have good skills, and it's like, I don't, right? So I mean, I didn't, and that's fine. But I really wanted to be a comic book artist, so I just decided like I didn't like rejection, so I was just like, all right, I'll do it myself. So I started a publishing company in the mid 90s and ended up just self-publishing my own comics that had, little tiny distribution, but it gave myself like a goal and a task and a way to kind of learn the ins and outs of the business aspect. And from there, it went from, okay, well, how am I going to promote these comics? I better learn the internet, better learn how to build a website, and better this and this. And then it's like, oh, I need to learn how to make t-shirts to sell this, to support this. And it kind of was, I started doing everything myself. And then from there, I kind of was like, well, I need supplemental income if I'm going to do this. So I'll just take any art job possible. So for the first few years, I was just doing local band flyers and anything that I could. Like, you wanted a flyer for your bakery, I'll do it, and those are $20, $30 jobs. Oh. But the main big job that I think really kind of catapulted me into like taking it seriously was in 2003, late 2003, I got hired by Warner Brothers in a band called The Used to be their art director. So wow. that was like, at that point I had a couple of bigger gigs and like comic book stuff and illustration gigs, and I was still kind of doing my own publishing company stuff. But up until that point, what that did by working with The Used and working on this huge, immediately gold selling album in 2004, it opened my audience to a group of kids that were as impressionable as I was when I saw the Max. So like like all of a sudden I had a whole new base of impressionable 15 and 16-year-old kids that were just like, I want to do art now because of this. And it was such a cool feeling that it just kind of like that cemented me more being like, all right, I'm going to push this, and I'm going to kind of like, I want to keep, pushing myself and being equally inspired by these people that say they're inspired by me. And it was just from there, it just kind of like went off,
That's really cool. And so from what I can see on your site, you have like a prolific amount of work. And I
gotta update that website.
I mean, it's funny to me that you're like, I have to do more. I'm like, what? There's a lot here. Where do you have time to do all this? But like, what would you say was the most challenging yet rewarding project that you've done so far?
Let's see. I mean, I feel like it's hard to say. It's like kind of like saying like picking a favorite, because I feel like with art, every project that you're working on is like, it's the end all best project you could ever imagine doing. And then as soon as it's done, you're like, that one sucked, I got to do something new. Right? Like, but I think as far as like most challenging and most rewarding, it definitely was a commercial job. I got hired to work on a movie called Sucker Punch, which came out in 2011, 2012. And I got brought onto this movie, Sucker Punch, directed by Zack Snyder, that before they had any material for it. So it was kind of like they hired me to create the foundation for what the film would be based on looking like, which was a lot of pressure from something. And and the main reason why it was so much pressure, like I wasn't going to say no to the job. I was completely blown away by the opportunity. It was a crazy job. It turned out to be like 9 months of just insanity. But when I was thinking about taking the job, the two things that I have avoided drawing or painting up until that point, and not for any reason other than like I just never explored them, was I never drew many female characters, and I never drew anything that was like weapon or robot based. Everything that I drew up until that point was very organic and wrinkly and ugly. Like and I was always like, I don't want to draw women, they're too pretty. Like I don't want to make them ugly. And so when I got that job, the job was basically like, hey, there's a movie about 5 women and robots and technology and weapons. And I'm just like, all right, okay, let's do it. So that was like so nerve-wracking of trying to just like basically teach myself these subtleties of drawing females and weapons and working with blacksmiths and all this crazy shit for so long that I just like, I lost so much sleep over that. That was the first time that I had I discovered that there's something called micro naps, and they're a real thing where you just kind of like you stay up for so long that like your brain kind of falls asleep while you're physically awake, and you're like dreaming in real state. And I remember like almost hallucinating because I was up so much working on that project. But in the end, it was like super rewarding because I got to be part of this like huge movie. So it was nuts.
Yeah, I totally remember that movie. And so you did the storyboards for it, or you did I remember there were like cuts to like comic strips in it too, right?
What I did, it's a really, really weird role that I don't even think has a role. Like I actually didn't even get a credit, like an end credit in the movie because it's totally
after
fine.
Losing all that sleep.
No, it's totally fine because the relationship that I have with that whole team and with Zach and stuff is great. So like, and it was like an amazing job. But yeah, the role that I had was like, before they had anything, I basically created like a mood board, a visual mood board for them to kind of like build out this world. And then I got brought in after so that was before they were even in pre-production. And then when they were actually in production, then I got brought in to like basically take what they had started building and add my touches to it, or kind of supervise like, oh, this weapon should look like this, or this robot should have a weird bunny face on it, and like these kind of things. So I was just adding more to like I started in the beginning and then I came back in the end to like do it, and then I got involved on the marketing end and did a bunch of marketing stuff for them. So
that's super cool. And I mean, it seems like the projects that seem the most like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing, like turn out to be like actually really fun, even though they're a little bit scary or stressful sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the only way to push yourself forward, is to just throw yourself into something that's scary. I mean, if creating something is 100% comfortable, I feel like you're not creating hard enough.
Hear that. And you had mentioned that when you make art, especially when you started as a kid, that it was something that you almost couldn't help yourself but do it because it was helping you escape something. Like, did you ever have a period of time where you felt blocked or anything, or has this been something that's always been like an easy escape for you?
I definitely have times where I feel blocked, and obviously doing anything that you love for a living has its ups and downs, because you're now kind of like put in this place where you put pressure on yourself to work within certain timelines or be creative in certain aspects, when in reality you're just like, I want to work when inspiration hits, and sometimes it doesn't hit. But as far as like with blocks and stuff, like it happens. But anything that I do creatively still definitely helps me kind of escape. So, I still struggle with depression and anxiety. I still kind of like, need that escape. And as long as I can kind of just do anything creative, it just takes my mind off of stuff still. So, I'm like a pretty firm believer in, artist blocks, and this goes with writing and I'm sure music and stuff too, that I convince myself that those blocks are there and they're going to be there until I get them out. So it's like, if I wait for them to go away, they're not going to go away, right? If I don't, so
yeah,
by getting them out, I'm just like physically scribble or physically drew. Like, I don't care if you have to draw Garfield 100 times in a row just to get something out, so you're doing it, but like eventually, if you're scribbling enough, like that block's gonna like go away and something's gonna be inspired. Like, oh, okay, cool, now I know what to draw. So I just feel like if you feel blocked, if you're a writer or a musician or an artist, just scribble, and you don't have to show anybody. That's one of the things that I feel like nowadays there's a lot more pressure on than, like, I started doing art before the internet, and then I got really fascinated by the internet in the late 90s, when there was the ability to share on message boards and start live journals and this and that. But now there is this weird obligation of like, oh shit, I have to share everything that I make, because if I don't put something up today, people are going to think that I don't do art anymore. And so I think that puts a lot of pressure on people to just overshare everything. And it's kind of important to remember that sometimes it is just important for you to do art that you don't ever want anybody to see, because sometimes that's kind of the most honest.
Yeah, I hear that. There's both. I feel like as an artist, there's like this, there's definitely value in being seen and witnessed, but there's something to be said for just like keeping things to yourself, and also just trying to manage that pressure of like, yeah, if I don't share what I'm doing, or if I don't produce more stuff, then I'll disappear or something.
Yeah.
Like, or people will forget, that I exist, or I don't know. I I don't know if you experience that anymore, but
I do.
Yeah.
I also, because like as I was saying, like I get excited by kind of new forms of media and stuff like that. So I got into streaming a few years ago as well, and that's one of the things where I was just like, okay, I'm gonna be streaming every day. I'm gonna be consistent, and then you just start putting pressure on yourself, and you're like, oh, this is affecting like actually what I'm streaming. Like I can't physically do this every day without killing myself. So
it's a lot. People don't realize it's a lot of physical and emotional and mental labor to stream, especially every day, and coming up with what you're gonna say, and then like kind of being on, like in quotes, so that you're kind of entertaining but still authentic. And there's like a lot going on for streamers. It's like no easy task. So it's almost like you get like a visibility hangover too when you show up every single day. It's just like too much. You need to be able to recharge yourself. Yeah. So I asked in the chat if anybody has any questions for Alex, but nobody's responded. I think people are just kind of listening. So
I can talk. Hopefully I'm not boring anybody, but
no, this is like really, really fun for me. I hope everyone else is enjoying it.
Nice.
It's it's I don't want to be like, oh, it's nice to hear that you still have like emotional hangups with your creative process, but I mean it's just to know that when you see somebody who's like successful and makes an incredible amount of work that really elicits emotion and like just like layers of feelings when I look at it. You make it look easy, but I know it's not. But it's just inspiring to know that it's something that can be surmounted, and that you can like use that energy to continue creating, and like the only way out is through, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So, yeah. Well, you guys can ask questions if you want, but we can also talk about this Makerspace drop that's going to be happening tomorrow, right?
Which I'm very excited about. Oh yeah, you have the video there showing up. Oh, so yeah, because we haven't revealed the full thing yet, but basically one of the reasons why I'm excited about this is only, like I was saying, like my fourth or fifth drop in total, and I've only done these drops on Makerspace yet before. They've been really, really supportive of me, which is awesome. And one of the things that I'm really excited about with this one is it's the first drop that I kind of have some subtle animation and an atmosphere in. So it's a original black and white drawing that I did, and then I did 3 completely different painted versions of it with variations of the full color. The full color one is an edition of 10, and then we have 2 kind of like trophy editions. So then there's the silver trophy edition, which is an edition of 5, and then the gold, which is a 1 of 1. So I'm really excited to kind of I wanted to give a little bit more of an edition size this time, so that I can kind of like get a few more collectors and start a few more conversations with people to collect, because I really do believe in this space, and I want to start building that community personally.
We're really glad to have you here and be in the community, because this is really great stuff. Like, I really actually wanted to ask you, like, so I know you were saying your inspirations are, these like 90s cartoons and comics, but for your concepts, are these like things from your dreams or like
No, surprisingly, I think I have pretty boring dreams. Like half of the times I'll just be like dreaming that the phone's ringing, and then I'll wake up holding the phone. I'll be like, oh, boring, right? Like, but every once in a while I have some weird dreams, but not that I can really remember. I think my main like kind of like approach has always been that I want to create stuff that I've never seen, but that I really want to see, and so it's and a lot of it is coming from a comic book and storytelling background. I've always really like I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was real young, and then because I was so introverted, you can't make a film on your own. Like you at least need somebody in front of the camera. So so like I just realized that like I'm not going to collaborate with anybody. That's beyond me. So I kind of got more attracted to art because it was private. But I was always attracted to the storytelling aspect of it too. And one of the things about most of my art is there's this element, it's kind of like a bonus element of storytelling. Cause I definitely am not, I haven't written any books. I don't write, I've written a couple screenplays and stuff, but I'm not like an everyday writer. Like I think I'm an artist first and foremost and a world builder, but I do like incorporating this bonus aspect of storytelling. And the way that I kind of compare it to is if you were to go to Disneyland, like a Disney World or Disneyland or specifically Disney, if you could go on like a ride, like you can stand in line at the Haunted Mansion and just go on the ride, or you can stand in line at the Thunder Mountain Railroad or whatever and just go on the ride. And you're like, yeah, that was a fun ride. But if you allow yourself to immerse yourself within the line and kind of read all these like signs that are going into it and storytelling aspect, and like for Thunder Mountain Railroad, you'll like learn that like this is a haunted mine train and these gold diggers are buried underneath there and there's this and that. But it kind of makes the end experience like a little bit more immersive and a little more like, oh, that's cool. It's not just like a cool looking thing. So a lot of my paintings have kind of backstories embedded in them that you can kind of read online, or other just kind of little mini stories that kind of go along with them. So and half of the time those stories kind of come up as I'm creating it. It's not like I'm kind of making the stories first, which is also another fun exercise. But I just kind of like, I like that bonus aspect of like, you can look at it and it can be like, oh, that's a cool, weird, bright, colorful, scary thing. I like it. It's cool. And then you can have your own interpretation. But if you wanted my interpretation, a lot of the times you can be like, oh, wow, that's cool. I didn't realize that because I just thought that was a painting of a weird hand. I didn't know that hand had a whole life of its own and escaped from its owner's arm and ran down the street, like that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. I mean, I hear that like, I mean, just looking at like this one, like the emotion here, like what comes up for me is like, this is like anxiety or fear or just like, I don't know, just like, oh my God, I'm so sick of fucking all these Trumps. Yeah, like I'm going to squish my eyeball out. Like, I mean, that really, it really encompasses that tightness that you like feel in your body when you're actually experiencing it. But you made something really beautiful out of it. Right. It's fun to look at it.
I do see a question regarding it says, are Alex's paintings free of backgrounds? For the most part, it was not a conscious effort in the beginning, but to answer the question, yes, most of my paintings don't have backgrounds, and it's not for any other reason other than it really is aesthetically pleasing to me to make these brightly colored things on like white or solid backgrounds. They really stand out, and a lot of the times it's more about the subject that I'm painting rather than like the composition of the whole piece. So I've done stuff with backgrounds, and I'll always keep exploring stuff, but for the most part, a lot of it is really focused on iconography and bold images kind of in the foreground.
Yeah, and I also see another question that says, do you sell your art on t-shirt and stuff like that? And I have a link to your shop.
I do, yeah. The shop's kind of cleaned out from Christmas time, but I do have a shop with that is constantly being restocked with shirts and prints and toys and books, and that's been that's actually one of the reasons why another reason why I'm so excited about the crypto space and the digital space is because like I'm always like, as an independent artist, you can't always depend on clients, right? Like, so trying to find ways to monetize my own artwork to further push myself to be able to create more is always something that I'm trying to do. So whether it's making t-shirts or now making toys and trying to make books, it's like trying to take something that you've created and make it marketable and monetizable is a really neat thing that you can do with art now. And so this, going into the crypto space, it's just another avenue where I can share it and sell it to people that might collect a different type of art than people that might want to just wear a t-shirt. So
yeah, awesome. It's awesome that you have a store. I hope that you're restocking soon, because I definitely will be giving myself belated Christmas presents.
I'm really, really wiped out from Christmas, which is great because I have a really kind of like loyal following on there, which is awesome. So I'm hoping to build that here. Yeah.
We have another question that says, it looks scary. Is there anything positive and funny in Alex's collection?
So I incorporate humor. I think that the most consistent thing in my artwork over the course of the last 25 years has been that, like, even if it looks different, like some stuff looks really creepy, some stuff looks really cartoony, some stuff looks dark, some looks boring and subtle. Like, all of it though consistently has my personality into it, which I always try to kind of like, there will always be a sense of dark humor kind of in the background of it. I also do the positivity is a weird thing for me to say that I push, but optimism, I think, is a more suitable word for what I put into my artwork, because I'm a very optimistic person. So I think even though there are these dark and harrowing, weird, hopeless looking images, there's always a sense of optimism in it, So
yeah, I feel that even with what you call them yourselves, like Brightmares. I mean, there's something to be said for this, like, I mean, I feel like that's what life is
it's a bright nightmare.
Like, there's still, even in darkness, there's still like beautiful things to be seen and appreciated.
Yeah. There's I can't remember who said this, the quote, and I would, even if I attempted to remember who said it, I would die. But it was something like it only takes like the smallest amount of light to cancel out complete darkness, which is true.
It's so true. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I would say I was like, I self-identified as goth as a teenager. So all this stuff, I'm like, it's still really, it's not that, it's like there's darkness there, but I totally see and not just in the colors, but something about the feel is humorous and joyful at the same time of expressing something that's
you know what's pretty funny is I was kind of goth too back in the day, but it was frustrating to me because even though like the art that I did was always kind of this bright, happy, not happy, I mean like weird and disturbing, but like it wasn't typical goth art with black backgrounds and purple glows and this and that. And so like I had like goth friends that were just like, what are you doing? Like you're confusing everybody. You're a disgrace to the culture. It's like, what? I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah. So I don't know why someone copied and pasted that same question, but I think that's a mistake. I think we've answered that. Cool. It's still positive, even though it's weird. Like, I mean, I see that. I'm having like a brain fart. Just make sure there was no other questions that got buried in our link dropping. Nope. I guess. So the drop is happening tomorrow at 3:30.
Tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Pacific
Standard Time. Yeah. And I'm very excited about that because, this is only basically the second drop that I've done and only the 5th NFT that I've released. So still learning the game, but I just started kind of like picking up my, New Year's resolutions are always kind of weird because I don't know. I don't like to, it's another one of those things where like, why do you put pressure on yourself? But I did kind of like vow to teach myself Blender and teach myself some more three-dimensional programs so that I can kind of incorporate more dimension into like my digital stuff. And now that I'm kind of exploring this NFT space, I want to like make it. I want to build these worlds out in ways that I couldn't before. So hopefully, we can look forward to doing that.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier that you wanted to be a filmmaker when you were younger. So do you see yourself kind of making like maybe mini films or like animated?
I am working on a couple different animated projects at the moment, but I did make a movie in 2000. When did it come out? 2015. There's a movie called Digging Up the Marrow that I actually made with a friend of mine, Adam Green, who's a horror director. He directed Hatchet and Frozen and those kind of movies. And I basically created a world, did this whole collection of art based on this world, did this whole story, made a book about it, and then Adam Green basically turned it into a film with me. So I kind of got to art direct this indie film and create monsters for it. And then, it came out in theaters briefly, and we made a movie. So that was awesome. But I think over the course of my career, I still like. I definitely don't want to rule it out that I won't direct anything, but I think that the passion for like the creative aspect, like the initial creative design aspect of it and the storytelling rather than the directing is something that appeals to me a little bit more.
Yeah. I was wondering like with the like learning Blender and stuff, if you saw yourself kind of, or I mean, the way that I see even your still illustrations is they're very theatrical to me. So maybe it's not like a whole movie, but just these like.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Like I totally hear what you're saying. Yes, exactly. I mean, like when I was kind of mentioning that I tie in storytelling into my work, it's really really short story. Like it's like paragraphs long of like this story. So I think that in that sense, learning things like Blender and After Effects will help me kind of incorporate those stories a little bit more. So yes, you're totally right. That is something that I hope.
Yeah, I can't wait to see more of that too as you put more work into the mint more NFTs and get more involved in the community. We're in the whale community. We're always excited to see new work and watching the creatives here evolve over the last year has been really exciting because I think a lot of us are, in that same boat where the NFT space is really new to us, and so everybody's super supportive and curious and excited and inspired by watching everybody evolve.
Yeah, I mean, it instantly inspired me. Like, there's things that I was just like, oh my god, like I gotta figure out how to do that, because what if I could do that with my things and this and that? It just gets inspiring. So now it's just a matter of finding the time. Like, I think that as I get older and it's there's never a bad thing of getting like more established and more successful, I think, but there is the time management where it's like it's really really hard to find time to be like, okay, I have to like cancel something if I'm going to dedicate myself to learning a new program.
Do you have any advice or tips for people that are having that? Like, what do you do for yourself when you're feeling pressed for time?
Old me would just say don't sleep ever and just keep going because why not? But I think that as I get older, I definitely realize how much self-care and health is can be effective. I mean, I've gone to the hospital multiple times with heart palpitations and weird things like it's all just self-induced stress. I mean, every time I just be like, dude, you gotta calm down, bro. And I'm like, but I got deadlines. And so but I think that now, like, I probably am not the best person to ask for about that. I really, really try super hard to get like 7 hours of sleep at night if I can, but it's rare. But I think that that's really important in exercise because, most of us are just sitting either behind a desk or behind a computer or drawing or something all day, and we're just eating junk food. But, but I think that I get, yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an advice because I'm never not working. That's the thing is like even if my girlfriend and I are watching TV on the couch, like we both have our computers and we're both doing something, right? We're both
Yeah.
like, it's really hard to disconnect. I mean, we physically have to remove ourselves from the situation and be like, okay, we need to go out to the desert and get an Airbnb for 2 days so that we can like just not look at our computers or not work.
Yeah, I hear that. It's as a working artist too. I mean, like that's your entire livelihood. So it's your livelihood, and it's also something that you just love to do because you love to do it. So it's like, where is the line between work and play and pleasure?
Yeah, that's always been a struggle for me. I mean, it's been, I think that was probably the hardest thing for me to kind of like cope with, being an artist, was that like there's not like a measurable level of success. It's not like a career where you can be a doctor where you go to med school and after 8 years you're a doctor. It's like, as an artist, you're like, I don't know, I can, there's no finish line. I feel like I'm always just, I don't know what I'm going to be. I have no idea where I'm going to be in 5 years. I have no idea what the economy is going to be like. I have no idea what art's going to be like. I have no idea if they're going to have like, if everybody's going to be working in virtual reality, if I need to learn that right now. Like, I don't know. So there's just this kind of like, in my career, it's been this weird thing where I just feel like I have to sacrifice everything around me because my time's running out to be successful. And that's the old version of like, that's like when I was like really like trying to figure things out. And that did require a lot of like personal sacrifices and relationship sacrifices and stuff. But there's definitely a balance of where like you kind of just like have to realize to approach art and learning the same way that you do when you're 14, 15 to 16 years old, where there's not really a concept of time running out. Like, you're just like, oh, I'm going to do this because I like doing it. And you don't think about like, well, what if it takes me 3 days? What happens? Like, what if I miss a phone call in 2 days? Like, that's like, it's such a shitty way to approach things. So like, if it's possible to just like try to get into that like 16-year-old state and be like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And if it takes me 5 days, it takes me 5 days, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know how long we have on this planet. So, might as well use the time doing what feels the best to do. Right. Yeah. So we're already at an hour now. That went by really fast for me. I guess nobody else has any questions, but
it's all right. I appreciate everybody.
I'm sure you're still in. Yeah. And I mean, I can't speak for you, Alex, but I'm sure if you shoot him a message, he'd be happy to answer any questions if you were a little too shy to ask publicly. This has been really great. And don't forget, tomorrow, everybody, the drops at Makersplace. Get your mitts on some editions. And I'm really excited. Thank you so much for being here, Alex. This was really fun. I hope to have you back soon.
I'm here. I appreciate you guys welcoming me into this community. It's awesome. So yeah, I hope everybody stays safe and is good wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks. Have a great night.
All right.